Bikers harassed a female truck driver. Then her military K9s taught them a lesson. Victoria Parker gripped the wheel of her 18-wheeler, her gloved hands steady despite the icy gusts buffeting the cab. The roar of the engine was a familiar comfort, a steady beat beneath the howling wind that swept across the Arizona highway. Moonlight gleamed off snow-dusted peaks in the distance, painting the desert in shades of silver and shadow. The highway stretched ahead in a straight, endless line, empty except for the glow of her headlights slicing through the dark. In the passenger seat, Max, a sable-coated German shepherd with keen amber eyes, shifted, his ears perking up at every sound. Duke, his darker furred counterpart, lay sprawled in the sleeper cab behind them, one eye half open and vigilant. Both dogs bore the subtle scars of combat, nicks in their ears, a stiffness in Duke's gait from a bullet wound long since healed. They were retired now, like her, but some instincts never faded. Victoria leaned back, rolling a knot from her shoulder as the heater hummed, battling the chill seeping through the windows. She'd been driving since dawn, hauling a load of medical supplies bound for a children's hospital in Houston. Antivirals, oxygen tanks, things that couldn't afford to be delayed. Her eyelids were heavy, but stopping wasn't an option. The storm warnings lit her dashboard with amber warnings, each alert a reminder of the timetable she couldn't break. "Almost there, boys," she murmured, reaching over to scratch behind Max's ears. His tail thumped against the console in response, eyes flicking to the side mirror, ever watchful. Victoria smiled faintly. It was moments like these, quiet, simple, when she almost believed the war was behind them. Almost. The radio crackled, cutting through the silence. Reckless driving reported on Route 66, local authorities advising caution. Multiple bikes seen heading east. Keep it slow out there, folks. Victoria's fingers tightened on the wheel. Bikers on this stretch of road were trouble 9 times out of 10. It didn't help that she was pushing close to midnight, with only the desert and the whispering wind for company. Her eyes darted to the rearview mirror out of habit, scanning the darkness for headlights. Nothing but the empty road stretching into shadows. Easy, she told herself, rolling her shoulders back. Max's ears twitched again, and he let out a low huff as if he could sense the tension bleeding off her. The first sign of trouble came 10 miles later. The roar of engines grew from a distant grumble to a snarling pack of headlights in the mirror, bright and predatory. Victoria's jaw tightened. A glance at the dash confirmed what she already knew. No signal, no way to call for backup. She drew a slow breath, fingers flexing against the wheel, and flicked her eyes to the passenger seat. "Stay," she commanded softly. Max let out a reluctant growl, but his muscles eased, ears pinned but obedient. She tapped the brakes, slowing just enough to keep control as the bikes closed in. They flanked her like wolves, dark shapes streaking with chrome and the glint of iron bats and chains. The leader, a hulking figure with a skull painted on his helmet, pulled alongside her window, gesturing wildly for her to pull over. His leather vest bore a familiar insignia. 2 black scorpions entwined, fangs bared, the sand scorpions. Victoria's breath steadied. Of course, it had to be them. She'd heard the stories. Cargo lifted clean off trailers, drivers beaten and left for the coyotes to find. She glanced at Max and Duke. Both were alert now, eyes fixed on the window, growls rumbling low in their chests. "Just a little longer," she muttered, fingers dancing over the switches above the dash. The lead biker pounded a fist against her door, shouting something she didn't catch. Victoria's lips thinned. "Fine," she whispered. Her thumb flicked up, hitting the control for the auxiliary lights. A bank of high beams roared to life along the trailer's sides, flooding the road with blinding white. The bikers recoiled, curses muffled by helmets. Victoria didn't wait. She shifted, foot slamming to the floor, the engine bellowing as the truck surged forward. The force threw her back against the seat, tires screaming on the asphalt. A glance in the mirror showed chaos. Bikers scattering, some veering too close to the shoulder and skidding into the desert scrub. One recovered fast, roaring forward with a gleam of steel in hand. He swung for her side mirror, shattering glass in an explosion of shards. Max let out a snarl, claws scraping the seat, and Duke snapped upright, hackles bristling. "I know," Victoria hissed, checking the gauges. They were closing fast, too fast for the truck to outrun for long. Her eyes flicked to the side panel, a series of switches labeled in neat black print. One was marked with red tape. The military-grade smokescreen had seemed a paranoid addition when Don installed it. Now with bikers swarming like hornets, she was grateful for every dollar spent. She flipped the switch. Twin canisters along the rear bumper hissed, releasing a rolling plume of thick gray smoke. It billowed out in a choking wave, swallowing the bikes behind her in a heartbeat. She could almost hear the swearing as engines sputtered and wheels squealed, blinded by the cloud. Victoria eased off the throttle, listening for the telltale grind of metal and the slam of asphalt. Two bikes peeled out of the smoke, one with a rider clutching his faceplate, the other swerving wildly before spinning out. Relief was short-lived. The roar of engines rose again, 5 bikes still on her tail, determined and closing fast. The lead rider pulled alongside, eyes dark behind his visor, and reached for something slung across his back. Victoria's pulse quickened, eyes flicking to the road stretching ahead. A rest stop sign loomed in the distance, barely legible in the swirling snow. 2 miles. She gritted her teeth, fingers white-knuckled on the wheel, and floored the gas. The engine howled in protest, tires slipping for a breathless second before gripping asphalt. The truck shot forward, snow whipping against the windshield in blinding sheets. Come on, she urged, sparing a glance at Max and Duke. Their eyes gleamed, tense but ready, muscles coiled like springs. The rest stop lights glimmered through the storm, a halo of orange in the night, drawing closer with agonizing slowness. Metal groaned as a biker slammed into the rear bumper, sending a jolt through the cabin. Victoria's teeth clicked together, but she held the wheel steady, breath coming shallow and fast. 100 yards, 50. The road curved, flanked by snow-laden pines in the squat outline of the rest stop. Victoria swung wide, tires spraying slush, and slammed the brakes. The trailer fishtailed, throwing up a wave of snow as the truck skidded to a halt in the parking lot. She was already moving, grabbing her pistol from the glove box and unhooking the cab door with a practiced motion. "Guard!" she snapped. Max and Duke sprang forward, snarls ripping through the air as they launched from the cab in a blur of fur and muscle. Their jaws found flesh and leather, teeth sinking in with ruthless precision. Screams and the wet crunch of bone filled the air, brutal and efficient. Victoria stepped down, pistol leveled, breath misting in the cold. The sand scorpions recoiled, eyes wide with shock, their confidence crumbling under the ferocious assault. One biker staggered back, clutching a bleeding arm, eyes wild. "Back off," Victoria warned, voice low and deadly, "or the dogs get hungry." The parking lot fell silent, save for the growl of engines and the low, lethal snarls of her K9s. Venom Jackson watched the chaos unfold from the saddle of his Harley, dark eyes narrowed behind mirrored goggles. The rest stop lights cast long shadows across the snow, illuminating the battlefield in harsh orange. His jaw clenched as he took in the scene. The shattered glass, the bikes strewn across the asphalt, and his men writhing in the snow with blood staining their leathers. The woman moved with military precision, pistol steady in her gloved hand, eyes cold and unblinking. The 2 German shepherds were savage blurs of motion, fur bristling as they tore into his crew with unrelenting force. Snarls and screams twisted together, and for a moment, Venom just watched, disbelief curdling into fury. This was supposed to be a routine job, an easy grab and go. Rough up a trucker, snag the cargo, and vanish into the storm. That's what Crimson had promised. But he'd seen enough combat to recognize the stance. The way she held her weapon, the quick, ruthless efficiency of her commands to the dogs. Military, ex-handler most likely. Crimson had said nothing about that, and the realization stoked the simmering anger in Venom's gut. That bastard had set them up. Venom kicked the stand down and swung off the bike, boots crunching through snow. "Fall back!" he bellowed, voice cutting through the chaos. His surviving men hesitated, glancing between him and the woman holding the line, pistol unwavering. "Now!" he roared, and at last they broke, staggering back towards the bikes, dragging the wounded with them. The shepherds growled, ears flat, but a single sharp whistle from their handler called them back, snapping to her side in a fluid motion. Smart, he thought, backing off without exposing her flank. As his men peeled out, tires spinning in the slush, Venom lingered a breath longer, eyes locking with the woman's across the stretch of snow and glass. Her gaze was hard, glacier cold, but beneath it, he saw something else. Not fear, determination, a warning, clear as day. Victoria drawled, leaning a shoulder against the wall. Need a favor. A pause, then a sigh. Of course you do. Hit me. Victoria's eyes narrowed, fingers tracing the cracked edge of the phone. Check a serial for me. Military grade. I'll send a picture. Another pause, then a muttered curse. This ain't gonna be pretty, is it? It never is, she replied flatly, eyes drifting to the snow-choked highway, shadows curling between the headlights. But I need to know who wants me dead, and why. The silence that settled after the call was almost suffocating, heavy with the static of distant storm winds and the muted hum of the diner's neon lights flickering against frosted windows. Victoria let the receiver hang for a beat longer than necessary, fingers still curled tight around the cold plastic, the dial tone droning in her ear. Dawn's parting words echoed, gruff and edged with concern. Lay low till I get back to you. And watch your six. As if she needed the reminder. With a slow exhale, she forced herself to move, boots crunching softly over the cracked linoleum as she strode past the flickering jukebox and out into the biting cold. Her breath plumed in white curls, disappearing into the gray dawn. And for a moment, Victoria just stood there, hand braced against the side of the truck, eyes scanning the parking lot through the veil of snow. The world was painted in monochrome. Gray sky, gray snow, black asphalt streaked with slush. And for a fleeting second, she could almost convince herself that the night behind her had been a bad dream, that she hadn't seen the sand scorpions peeling back into the dark with blood streaked across the snow and her pulse thundering in her ears. Almost. A low whine broke her from the haze, warm breath fogging the passenger window where Max waited, amber eyes locked on her with unwavering focus. Duke's head popped up behind him, ears pricked, nose pressed to the glass, leaving a streak of condensation. Yeah, Victoria muttered, swinging the door open and hauling herself up with a grunt. I know. Shouldn't leave you two alone. Max huffed pointedly, shifting aside just enough to let her settle into the driver's seat, his nose nudging at the pocket where she'd stashed a half-eaten beef jerky. Victoria snorted, digging it out and tossing a piece to each of them, lips quirking at the way Duke snapped his out of the air with a pleased rumble. The cab was warm, the heater still blowing steady, but even with the doors locked and the dogs alert, unease scratched at her nerves. She fished the tracker from her coat pocket, the little black box cold and sleek between her fingers, the red light winking with ominous precision. Military grade, Don had said, voice taut with recognition. Not gang tech, not cartel. Private contractors, most likely. Someone with deep pockets and enough pull to redirect an entire biker gang on a dime. And that meant crimson. Victoria's jaw clenched. She'd heard the name whispered in bases overseas, half rumor, half warning. A ghost that moved between factions, trading intel and weapons, always one step ahead of any paper trail. The kind of ghost that didn't haunt truckers hauling medical supplies unless those supplies were cover for something else. Her eyes drifted to the rearview mirror, the trailer looming behind them, snow crusting the mud flaps and icicles clinging to the steel frame. For the first time since she'd taken the job, uncertainty gnawed at her resolve. She'd run every check, scanned every manifest, antivirals, oxygen tanks, bandages, all bound for St. Mary's in Houston. Legitimate, routine, nothing to warrant a small war on the highway, unless there was something she'd missed. Damn it, she muttered, thumbing the map app on her cracked burner phone. No service this far out, of course. Typical. Change of plans, boys. We're making a pit stop. Max woofed softly, as if in agreement, and Duke thumped his tail against the seat, ears flicking forward. With a grim smile, Victoria jammed the key into the ignition, the diesel engine grumbling to life beneath her boots. Snow crunched as she eased the rig around, swinging back onto the highway, tires biting into ice. The radio fizzled static before settling on a news broadcast, the signal wavering with each dip and rise of the road. Severe storm warnings still in effect through New Mexico and Texas. Multiple road closures reported. She twisted the knob, cutting it off with a growl. One problem at a time. A safe house first, somewhere out of sight until Don called back with answers, or at least coordinates for a burner route that wouldn't lead her straight into another ambush. The sun was a pale disk behind clouds by the time she spotted it. A low, squat building half buried in snow, paint peeling from the sign that read, Rusty's Garage in faded red letters. The gravel lot was empty save for a snow-choked pickup and a single Harley crusted with salt, its seat half buried beneath a drift. Victoria pulled up slow, eyes scanning the windows for movement, one hand resting instinctively on the pistol at her hip. The door creaked open as she slid down, boots crunching through slush. Max and Duke flanking her with ears pricked and noses quivering. Inside, the garage was dim, lit by a single flickering bulb and the pale glow from a kerosene heater. Tools hung from pegboards, oil slicked the concrete, and a radio crackled low in the corner, warbling old rock ballads. At the counter, a man looked up, dark eyes narrowing beneath a grease-smeared cap. Mid-50s, maybe, built like a linebacker gone to seed, with a scar bisecting one thick brow. His gaze flicked to the dogs, then back to her, lips curling in a half-sneer. "You're a bit off the main road, ain't ya?" His voice was gravelly, marked by a southern drawl and too many cigarettes. "Blew a tire," Victoria lied smoothly, jerking a thumb at the trailer outside. "Thought I'd see if you had a patch kit before I call for a tow." The man snorted, arms folding over a grease-streaked flannel. "In this storm? Good luck getting a signal. Best you'll do is a room at the motel across the way and a pot of Rusty's god-awful coffee." His eyes flicked to the window, and for a split second, his guard slipped. "But you might want to hurry. Storm's fixing to get worse." Victoria's eyes narrowed. His fingers were twitching, eyes darting to the road behind her, and something about the way he shifted screamed wrong. "Appreciate the tip," she drawled, turning slow, one hand still resting light on her hip, thumb tracing the pistol's grip. A flash of motion through the window, black leather, the glint of chrome, sent her heart hammering into her throat. Two bikes roaring up the highway, followed by a third, a skull insignia glinting from the lead rider's vest. Sand scorpions. Her mind snapped to tactical overdrive. No time to double back, no time to take the rig. 5 minutes, maybe less, before they boxed her in. Victoria's fingers tightened, voice low and steady. "You got a back door?" The man blinked, mouth opening to protest, but one glance at the pistol and the dogs bristling at her side shut him up fast. "Round the back," he grunted, jerking his chin towards a door half hidden by oil drums. "Leads to the scrapyard, but you're crazy if you think you're outrunning them on foot." "Good thing I don't plan to run," Victoria muttered, shoving the door open with a grunt, snow swirling in to sting her cheeks. Max and Duke slipped out ahead, noses to the ground, muscles coiled like springs. Victoria's eyes narrowed, breath misting in the frigid air. Let them come. The cold slapped Victoria's face the moment she stepped into the scrapyard, snow stinging her cheeks in relentless flurries. The wind screamed between the twisted hulks of old cars and rust-riddled semis, carrying the bitter tang of diesel and frost. Max and Duke moved like shadows at her side, noses to the ground, muscles rippling beneath thick fur. Their ears pricked forward, catching every crunch of snow, every whisper of metal groaning under the weight of ice. Victoria kept low, gloved fingers brushing the pistol at her hip, eyes scanning the maze of junked vehicles rising like jagged teeth on all sides. The sand scorpions were closing in. She could hear the engines, a low growl building in the distance, the howl of exhaust pipes splitting the storm's howl. 3 bikes, maybe 4, too many to fight head-on. She sucked in a breath, ice biting her lungs, and swung left. Boots crunching through drifts as she pressed a hand to Max's flank, guiding him through the labyrinth of shattered glass and twisted steel. The dark bulk of a semi loomed ahead, cab door flapping open in the wind, its windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. Victoria ducked inside, boots scraping rust and grime, breath puffing in white curls. Max and Duke slipped in after her, paws light and silent, ears swiveling at every distant rumble. She eased the door shut, pistol drawn, eyes narrowing through the fractured glass. The bikes tore into the lot a heartbeat later, headlights sweeping the drifts in stark beams. Engines rumbled and died, leaving only the storm's snarl and the faint crunch of boots on snow. 4 of them, she counted, figures in black leathers and skull-painted helmets, rifles slung across backs, knives gleaming at hips. Their leader strode forward, rifle loose in one hand, the other gesturing sharply to the man at his side. Venom. She recognized the jagged scar curling over his jaw, the patch on his vest, a scorpion coiled around a skull. His visor gleamed as he glanced around, head tilting with eerie calm. "Fan out," his voice carried, muffled but commanding. "She's close. Check every car, and if you see the dogs, shoot first." Victoria's teeth clenched. Max let out a low growl, lips curling to bare white fangs, and Duke's hackles bristled, a rumble thrumming deep in his chest. She pressed a hand to Max's neck, fingers flexing in the thick fur. "Easy," she breathed, pulse thundering behind her ribs. Not yet. She had the advantage here. Cover, high ground, the storm cloaking sound and scent alike. But if they circled around, pinned her from both sides, it wouldn't matter. Victoria's eyes flicked to the dashboard, a snarl tugging her lips. The radio was dead, the wires gutted long ago, but the lighter still gleamed in the slot. A plan took shape in fractured pieces, half instinct, half desperation. One way out, if she moved fast enough. The sound of boots crunching through snow grew louder, shadows sweeping past the cab in jerky arcs. She slid the lighter free, thumbs sparking it with a flick. The flame caught quick, licking at the brittle edges of a torn map sprawled across the passenger seat. Firelight danced over cracked dials and rusted metal, throwing shadows wild and flickering. Victoria's eyes narrowed, breath misting white, and she shoved the door open with a grunt, snow swirling in frigid gusts. Max and Duke slipped out ahead, bellies low, tails tucked, claws scraping ice. The flames licked higher, catching on old upholstery, thick black smoke curling from shattered windows. Victoria swung left, boots skidding on ice, the pistol's grip warm and familiar in her hand. Engines roared to life behind her, shadows lurching, and she threw herself behind a rust-eaten pickup as a bullet screamed past, shattering glass in a spray of glittering shards. "Find her!" Venom's snarl cut through the wind, footsteps pounding closer, a dark blur flanking wide. Max lunged, a snarl ripping the air, teeth finding flesh with a wet crunch. The biker screamed, rifle clattering to the snow as the shepherd bore him down, jaws locked on his forearm. The others spun at the sound, curses snapping in sharp bursts. Victoria swung out, sights leveled, breath steady despite the hammering in her chest. One shot, clean through the knee, another, center mass. The biker collapsed with a strangled grunt, red blooming dark and wet across leather. She was already moving, boot crunching his rifle deeper into the snow, eyes darting to the dark blur of motion, sweeping wide behind a half-collapsed RV. Duke's snarl tore the air, the shepherd springing forward, jaws latching onto the leg of a second man with bone-cracking force. His victim screamed, flailing, fingers scrabbling for the pistol at his hip, but Duke yanked him down, thrashing with a savage shake. Victoria's eyes flicked up, catching a flash of motion to her right, a skull-faced biker breaking cover with a shotgun raised. She threw herself flat behind a sedan's rusting frame as the blast shredded air, buckshot peppering the doors in a shrieking spray. Her ears rang, snow burning cold against her cheek, but she swung up fast, sights aligning, and squeezed the trigger. The shotgun kicked sideways with a choked roar, its owner crumpling with a gurgling curse. Dark shapes swirling around him. Steam curled from the barrel of her pistol, mingling with the smoke and snow. Venom's curse echoed, raw and furious, boots crunching closer through the drifts. "Where is she?" His voice cracked the air, rifle snapping up, visor swinging wide. "Find that bitch!" Victoria's lips curled, fingers flexing on the pistol's grip. She slid a fresh magazine home with a soft click, breath misting in slow measured exhales. Max's growl rumbled low and dark. eyes fixed on the shadows shifting between skeletal trucks. They were closing in. She could hear boots scrabbling over metal, the faint rasp of suppressed breaths. Time to move. Victoria darted left, boots skidding, pistol snapping up. A shot cracked the air, splintering ice by her heel, and she threw herself down behind a snow-laden tractor, gasping for breath, fingers trembling on the grip. Two left, maybe three. Too close for comfort. Max and Duke flanked her, ears flat, breath curling white. "Guard," she muttered, throat raw with cold and adrenaline. The shepherds growled low, bodies coiled and ready, eyes fixed on the shifting shadows. The wind screamed, carrying snow in blinding gusts, drowning the snarl of engines and the distant crackle of flames. For a heartbeat, everything narrowed. The burn of cold air, the iron tang of blood, the rumble of boots closing in fast. Venom's shadow loomed, rifle glinting as he swung out, skull visor reflecting the flickering blaze. His curse cracked the air, rifle snapping up, finger tightening on the trigger. Victoria moved on instinct, flinging herself sideways with a grunt, pistol spitting fire. The first shot took him high in the shoulder, spinning him with a snarl, blood spraying dark against snow. Venom staggered, boots slipping, rifle swinging wide. His visor snapped up, eyes wild beneath, teeth bared in a snarl. "You," he choked, blood flecking his lip. Max lunged before he could finish, a dark blur ripping him down with a savage growl. Teeth flashed, blood spraying, and Venom's scream split the air, raw and wrenching. Victoria didn't hesitate, boots crunching forward, pistol leveled. "Call them off," she snapped, voice flat and steady despite the raw thundering of her pulse. "Or I will." Venom's eyes narrowed, fury flaring bright and lethal. But her finger twitched on the trigger, eyes cold as iron, and his jaw clenched, breath rasping. "Stand down," he ground out, voice raw with pain. The remaining bikers hesitated, rifles wavering, eyes flicking between their leader and the woman standing over him, with a gun leveled at his skull. For a heartbeat, silence stretched, breath curling white, boots scuffing snow. Then slowly, rifles dipped. The silence hung heavy, broken only by the rasp of Venom's breath and the distant crackle of flames licking at the semi's cab. Snow hissed as it melted against searing metal, steam curling in ghostly tendrils that twisted through the scrapyard. Victoria's pulse pounded at her temples, fingers flexing on the pistol's grip, but her eyes stayed locked on Venom's. Dark and narrowed beneath the cracked visor, rage and something else flickering in their depths. Max loomed above him, teeth bared, a deep growl rumbling through his chest. Duke flanked her left, breath curling white, eyes fixed on the other bikers whose rifles dipped by inches, leather creaking as fingers twitched with barely contained fury. She could feel the storm's chill biting through her coat, a cruel wind tearing at her braid and numbing her cheeks. But none of it mattered. Only the man at her feet and the faint tremor in his clenched jaw. "I said, call them off," Victoria repeated, voice flat and cold as iron. The muzzle of her pistol hovered an inch from Venom's forehead, steady despite the raw burn of adrenaline thrumming through her limbs. "Or I will let the dogs finish what they started." Venom's eyes narrowed to slits, teeth bared in a grimace, but the barrel pressing between his eyes left little room for bravado. "Stand down," he spat, voice raw and thick with fury. His fingers flexed around the rifle's grip, knuckles stark white beneath battered gloves, but he gritted his teeth, jaw muscle jumping. "All of you, stand the hell down." A breathless pause stretched, boots shuffling, eyes darting from him to the woman above him with a gun and death in her gaze. Then slowly, rifles lowered, fingers slipping from triggers with a faint rasp of leather. A grumble of dissent simmered through the ranks, curses bit off beneath muffled breath, but none of them moved, eyes wary and flicking to the shepherds prowling close, teeth gleaming white in the gloom. Victoria's lips thinned, thumb flicking the safety with a soft click. "Good choice," she muttered, and stepped back, boots crunching over ice and rust, pistol trained steady as she jerked her chin toward the semi's charred wreckage. "Weapons, on the ground. Move!" A snarl twisted Venom's face, dark eyes glinting with murder, but one glance at Max's bristling form, and he growled, tossing his rifle down with a clatter that echoed off the snow-laden scrap piles. His men hesitated, eyes darting between him and the weapons at their sides, lips pulled tight with indecision, but one by one, shotguns, pistols, and knives clattered to the snow, boots scuffing, curses slipping soft and venomous. Duke's ears twitched at every sound, growls rumbling low and unbroken, eyes dark slits beneath heavy brows. Victoria exhaled slow and even, throat raw with the cold, mind racing a mile a minute. 4 down, weapons scattered and boots kicking nervously at glass shards and snow, eyes flicking wide and uncertain. But 4 was still too many to handle if they bolted, and the night was closing in fast. Clouds dark and heavy above the scrapyard's jagged skyline. She could feel exhaustion clawing at her edges, muscles aching from the hours spent hunched behind the wheel, bruises blossoming beneath the stiff canvas of her coat. No time to waste. "You!" she snapped, eyes locking on the youngest of the bikers, a lanky kid, barely old enough to shave, eyes wide and skittish beneath a skull-painted visor. He flinched at the attention, hands twitching where they hovered half-raised in the air. "Tie them!" Victoria ordered, voice clipped and steady, jerking her chin to the rusted coils of chains spilling from the bed of a pickup. "Now!" The kid hesitated, glancing to Venom with a question half-formed on his lips, but a glare and a snarl cut him short. "Do it!" Venom spat, voice a low rasp that ground like glass. His jaw clenched, eyes narrowed with dark promise. "Or I swear to God you won't see another sunrise." That sent the kid scrambling, boots skidding through slush, hands fumbling at the chains with a clatter of rust and steel. Victoria watched in silence, breath misting white, pistol never wavering from Venom's chest. Max circled close, teeth bared, a rumble thrumming in his chest like thunder. Duke prowled slow and deliberate, eyes fixed on the bikers whose gazes darted wide, fingers twitching at empty holsters. "Sit!" Victoria commanded, voice low and firm, and the shepherds sank back on their haunches with a reluctant huff, ears pinned but obedient. Chains rasped and clinked, boots scuffed snow, and the kid's hands trembled as he wound iron links tight, lips bitten raw, and eyes flicking wide to Venom's glare. The other bikers cursed, shoulders hunched, eyes darting to the shadows, stretching long and jagged between snow-laden wrecks. Dark blood stained the drifts where bodies sprawled limp and silent, steam curling soft and eerie from wounds gone still. The storm's howl drowned the crackle of flames devouring the semi's cab, smoke roiling black against snow and darkening sky. Victoria's eyes narrowed, thumb flexing on the pistol's grip. Breath slow and steady despite the thunder in her chest. She could feel the questions coiling behind her teeth, raw and bitter with the taste of blood and diesel. "Why the cargo?" she bit out, voice low but iron-edged, eyes pinned to Venom's dark glare. "What's so valuable you'd risk this? Antivirals don't sell for enough to justify a damn war." Venom's lips peeled back in a snarl, shoulders braced against the rusted truck bed, eyes gleaming dark with fury and something sharper, something like contempt. "You really think this was about the cargo?" he growled, voice raw and jagged. Blood streaked his temple where Max's teeth had ripped flesh, painting his cheek in stark crimson rivulets. "Jesus, you really don't know." Victoria's eyes narrowed to slits, jaw flexing, a snarl twisting her lips. "Enlighten me," she snapped, pistol's muzzle pressing hard against his sternum. Venom barked a laugh, hoarse and breathless, head falling back against the truck with a dull clank. "Crimson was right," he rasped, eyes glinting beneath the cracked visor. "You're in so far over your head, you don't even see the trap closing." A chill licked down Victoria's spine, ice crawling beneath the collar of her coat. "Keep talking," she growled, but her voice cracked at the edges, raw with suspicion and the sick twist of dread unfurling behind her ribs. Venom chuckled darkly, eyes narrowing to slits, breath rasping white in the frigid air. "You think it's about the meds? About a few crates of oxygen tanks and bandages?" He sneered, teeth bared in a crimson-streaked grin. "Number. It's about what's inside. Those tanks aren't carrying oxygen." Victoria's heart slammed against her ribs, fingers tightening on the pistol's grip until leather creaked. "What are they carrying?" she bit out, voice a low snarl. Venom's grin stretched wider, dark eyes gleaming with a triumph that curdled her blood. "Enough sarin gas to level half of Houston," he hissed, breath curling white and tainted with copper. "And you're the one delivering it." The words dropped like stones, heavy and suffocating, ripping the air from her lungs in a raw, choking rush. The pistol trembled in her hands, vision narrowing to the dark glint of Venom's eyes, the cold smirk curling his bloodied lips. Max growled, ears pinned, but the sound was distant, drowned beneath the rush of blood thundering in Victoria's ears, the cold searing her lungs with each ragged breath. Sarin. The word stuck, raw and jagged, ice curling down her spine. Not medical supplies, not antivirals, a trap. She staggered back a step, eyes wide, pistol lowering by inches, breath coming shallow and broken. And all at once the storm seemed to close in, dark and suffocating, wind howling through rust and wreckage, carrying the faint echo of sirens in the distance. The sirens wailed, faint at first but rising through the storm's howl, a distant chorus of dread. Red and blue lights pulsed at the edge of the scrapyard, flickering through the snow in eerie strobes. Victoria's breath clouded white, sharp and shallow, chest heaving with the weight of Venom's words echoing raw and unrelenting. Sarin gas, enough to wipe out half of Houston. The pistol hung limp in her grip, fingers numb with cold and shock, eyes fixed on the dark gleam of Venom's grin, blood streaking his teeth. Her pulse thundered, bile clawing up her throat with every ragged breath. Not medical supplies, not a relief mission. A trap, laid with brutal precision and baited with her loyalty. Her jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth, fingers trembling on the pistol's grip. "You're lying," she snapped, but the snarl cracked, brittle and hollow, even to her ears. Venom chuckled low and hoarse, head falling back against the rusted truck bed with a dull clank. Blood streaked his temple, dripping slow and crimson into the snow, but his eyes gleamed dark with triumph. "Am I?" he rasped, voice raw and ragged. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Open one of those tanks. See for yourself." His grin stretched wider, dark and cruel, eyes narrowing to slits. "You really thought Crimson wanted a few crates of bandages and painkillers? Jesus, you're dumber than I thought." Fury licked hot and savage beneath Victoria's ribs, bitter and suffocating. Her teeth clenched, knuckles white on the pistol's grip, but her gaze flicked, brief and instinctive, to the trailer looming dark and hulking at the scrapyard's edge, snow crusting the mud flaps and icicles clinging to steel. The wind screamed through shattered windows, drowning the siren's wail, but she could hear her pulse pounding, thick and uneven, blood roaring in her ears. No, it couldn't be true. Dawn had vouched for the cargo. Elena had run the manifest herself. Clean, verified, no discrepancies, except Dawn hadn't answered her last call, and Elena hadn't returned her messages in over a day. A chill licked down her spine, ice curling beneath the collar of her coat. The pistol trembled in her grip, vision narrowing to the dark glint of Venom's eyes, the cruel twist of his grin. No, there had to be a mistake. But even as the denial tore through her mind, raw and frantic, her boots were already moving, snow crunching beneath each step, breath misting white in the storm's bite. Max and Duke flanked her, ears pinned, eyes darting wide and wary. The trailer loomed tall and silent, steel sides streaked dark with soot and blood. Victoria's fingers fumbled with the latch, cold biting through leather and wool, breath hitching sharp and uneven. She wrenched the doors open with a grunt, snow billowing in, eyes darting to the stacked crates strapped down with chains and canvas tarps. Medical symbols stamped in neat black letters. St. Mary's, Houston. A lie. Her hands shook as she pried the lid loose, nails splintering against plywood. The crate groaned open, and the first tank gleamed dully beneath the flickering light. Tall and matte black. Not the pale green of oxygen, not marked with hospital codes or serials. Her heart lurched, throat seizing, breath rasping raw and strangled. The sirens were closing in, red and blue lights flickering bright and urgent through the snow, boots pounding, voices shouting through the storm. Hands in the air! The command cracked through the wind, harsh and unyielding. Step away from the trailer! Now! Victoria's teeth clenched, fury twisting sharp and bitter behind her ribs, eyes darting to the dark shapes closing in. Riot gear, rifles leveled, snow swirling in blinding flurries. The muzzle of a shotgun glinted beneath the strobes, black and ominous. A figure braced behind it, voice rasping, harsh and familiar. Sergeant Nash. A curse slipped past her lips, raw and venomous, pistol twitching in her grip, eyes narrowing to slits. Nash's mouth twisted, eyes flat and cold beneath the helmet's visor. Drop it, he growled, rifle sights fixed dead center on her chest. Now! She hesitated, breath hissing between clenched teeth, heart slamming wild and unsteady against her ribs. Max growled low, hackles bristling, Duke's ears flat, lips peeled back in a snarl. But the rifles bristling in every direction left no room for argument, no cover to dive for, no path to run. With a snarl, she let the pistol drop, metal clattering sharp against ice. Nash's lips twisted, dark eyes narrowing with something that might have been regret, but looked a hell of a lot more like pity. You're under arrest, he bit out, voice cold and steady, boots crunching, slow and deliberate as he approached, handcuffs glinting in the flickering light. Conspiracy to commit terrorism, trafficking banned weapons across state lines. Anything you say, you son of a bitch, Victoria spat, voice cracking raw with fury, hands jerking against the cuffs as he snapped them tight. You set me up. Nash's jaw tightened, fingers flexing with a faint tremor, but his eyes stayed flat and distant, dark with something that might have been guilt. It's over, he ground out, voice low and strained. Just stand down. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Screw you, she snarled, teeth bared, eyes darting to the trailer, the tanks gleaming dark and ominous beneath snow and blood. The cuffs bit into her wrists, metal searing cold, breath fogging white with every ragged gasp. Fury twisted bitter and suffocating, bile clawing at her throat, but the rifles bristling close left no room to fight, no chance to break free. Max let out a low, guttural growl, eyes fixed on Nash with teeth bared, muscles coiled to lunge. Easy, Victoria bit out, voice raw and tight, fingers curling slow and deliberate. Stand down, boy. The shepherd hesitated, eyes flicking wide and uncertain, ears pinned. But at her sharp gesture, he slunk back, hackles bristling, a rumble thrumming deep in his chest. Nash's jaw flexed, eyes narrowing, hand twitching on the rifle's grip. Smart move, he muttered, voice low and strained. Now let's go. They dragged her through snow and shattered glass, boots crunching with every step, hands locked tight behind her back, wrists raw and bleeding beneath steel. Red and blue lights flickered harsh and blinding, sirens warbling, shadows stretching long and jagged between rust-eaten wrecks. The trailer loomed dark and ominous, smoke curling from twisted metal and snow swirling in relentless flurries. Venom's laugh echoed raw and breathless through the storm, dark eyes gleaming with vicious triumph. See you in hell, sweetheart, he rasped, blood streaking his lips, grin stretched wide and mocking. Victoria's teeth clenched, a fury and betrayal twisting raw and unrelenting beneath her ribs, eyes narrowing to slits. Not if I see you first, she growled, voice low and venomous, fingers flexing, slow and deliberate behind her back. Nash's grip tightened, fingers digging bruises deep and dark, but she bared her teeth, eyes glinting cold and murderous. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. In the end, this story is a powerful reminder that betrayal can come from the places we least expect, and that true loyalty is proven in the darkest moments. Victoria's journey taught us that resilience is forged not by avoiding the fight, but by facing it head-on, even when the odds are stacked against us. Her unbreakable bond with Max and Duke showed that trust and loyalty cannot be bought or faked. They are earned through sacrifice and unwavering courage. The battle she fought wasn't just against enemies on the outside, but against the voices of doubt within herself. It's a testament to the power of perseverance and the strength that comes from never backing down, no matter how alone you feel. Thank you for watching and joining us on this intense journey of trust, betrayal, and survival. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling tales. Your support means everything to us, and we can't wait to share more incredible stories with you. Until next time, stay strong, stay loyal, and keep fighting the good fight.